Today, a new campaign launches to encourage us all to understand what to do if someone has a seizure in public. Epilepsy is a condition that affects around 630,000 people in the UK. For many of them, the experience of having a seizure in public are nothing short of harrowing. The stigma surrounding epilepsy and the potential of having a seizure in public is causing people to feel isolated and excluded from social events, with over 50% reporting that they've had to avoid public places due to the fear of having a seizure. People with epilepsy also face emotional trauma and physical danger when having seizures in public. Shockingly, over 47% of people with epilepsy reported being accused of being drunk or on drugs after having a seizure in public, further adding to the stigma and misunderstanding surrounding the condition. It's time for us to take action to raise awareness and create a more supportive, exclusive environment for people with epilepsy. Today, the Epilepsy Action is launching the case, an acronym to teach the key things we need to know and do when it comes to looking after someone having a seizure in public. With me is Rebecca Smith, Deputy CEO of Epilepsy Action, and Imogen Coultery, who has her own story to tell. Rebecca and Imogen, welcome to the programme.
Thank you. Hi.
Thanks very much. Hi.
Well, firstly, what's your thoughts, Rebecca, and concerns about this data and what it reveals on the subject of epilepsy and the people with the condition and their experiences?
Well, it's really shocking to hear, and even for us as a charity that's constantly talking to people and hearing their stories, it's still, when you sort of see the statistics written down and those percentages, it is really scary that people are still experiencing these things today.
Why do you think there's a lack of understanding with regard to the condition of epilepsy?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different reasons. And I think what we're trying to do with the campaign is say, you know, it's very easy to learn about this and educate yourselves about how to support someone with epilepsy. And if you've never heard about it before and you haven't come into contact with someone with epilepsy, that doesn't mean you won't in the future, because this is something that can happen to someone at any time. And, you know, you might be the person that's there to help them at the point that it does happen to them.
And I mean, it must be harrowing, as I've just said in the introduction, for anyone with the condition, but equally, you know, with somebody who genuinely wants to help, what and has no first aid experience, what sort of advice would you give them? Okay,
so we've obviously put together this campaign, which, as you mentioned, is all about sort of thinking about 4 stages, which we've labelled care. And I think the first thing to say is you don't need to understand first aid or be confident about first aid to do this. This is so much about being there and reassuring someone, and also, you know, like understanding that there's lots of different symptoms and lots of different beginnings to a seizure. And so you shouldn't automatically assume you know what's wrong with someone. So, I mean, what we'd say is 4 steps to just bear in mind. The first one is comfort. So if someone does look like they might appear to be drunk, wobbly, or if they have fallen to the floor, what we're asking you to do is cushion their head, make sure they're in a position where they can breathe easily. And then the next bit in the care is action. So people who have regular seizures will often have information on them, and that might be a bracelet, it might be something they wear around their neck or have in their bag. So usually you can find some information that might, you know, give you more insight in how to support them. And at the same time, if you can time the seizure or get someone else nearby to do that, that also helps to understand when emergency services need to come into play. So the third stage is about reassuring. So staying with someone and making sure that you're talking to them, so when they regain consciousness, they don't feel scared and they understand where they are. Yeah. And you might put them into a recovery position at this point, which is lying them on their side. And then the final one is the emergency side. So if the seizure's gone on over 5 minutes, if they've gone from one seizure to another, or if for any reason you think it's their first seizure, then they're the times when you would call an ambulance.
Could I just bring in Imogen here at this point? Imogen, I see. I love Imogen. I see from the notes that I have here that you were diagnosed at the age of 9, and when you went on an adventure holiday, you had a bad experience. Would you like to share that with us?
Yeah. So recently, I went to Mexico and Guatemala with a tour company, and I informed them about epilepsy, what they should do, stay calm, and so on and so forth. And they said, okay, this is fine, you have doctor's permission. Unfortunately, I think it was on the 6th day or something of the holiday, I had one. We just left the coach and I collapsed and I had a seizure. And I recovered fine. But the next day, the tour guide asked to have a talk with me. And she accused me of not taking care of myself, scaring everyone. People didn't come on holiday to see an epileptic fit. I shouldn't be doing these trips. And she just made me feel so ashamed, guilty, lonely. I didn't want to hang around with them anymore. And I decided to leave Guatemala early and come home because I was feeling so guilty, so embarrassed. If she'd known more about epilepsy, about the condition, then I don't think that would have happened.
And I guess this might sound like a strange question, but to some extent, have you some sympathy for the lack of knowledge that people might have with regard to the condition?
I'm not sure if I have any sympathy for it because it's so known and anyone can get it. You know, it's like cancer. Anyone can get cancer. Anyone can get epilepsy. It's not just from a brain injury or being born with it. So I think it's about time that everyone knows about, you know, what epilepsy is. And it's not what you see in the movies where people fall and, you know, face goes blue and everything. There's so many different types of seizures. More companies need to know about it. For the sake of customers, you know, customer service, and I want my freedom. There's so much stuff I can't do because the public don't know about epilepsy, and that just doesn't seem fair. No,
and it is shocking to see some of the statistics. Thank you very much for sharing your experience with regard to that. And Rebecca, what about this campaign? And tell us about the campaign, because obviously it's to do with education.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's this week's National Epilepsy Week, so it's a really great time to talk about this. We've got a great video, 1.5 minutes long, so, you know, really short, to the point. We've got downloadable information and posters. There's a whole host of resources there for anyone who, you know, like anyone who's working in schools, public transport, wherever, just for a couple of minutes of understanding. And then if they do come across this situation, they can make life a whole lot better for people with epilepsy.
And very importantly, finally, where can people and general members of the public go for, and employers as well, companies, anyone, go for more information? Yeah,
so go to our website, so either search for Epilepsy Action or go to epilepsy.org.uk, and not only will you find all that information, but there's also e-learning training programs there for employers that are free, and for schools, so there's lots that you can access.
Well, thank you very much both for coming onto the programme. That's Rebecca Smith, Deputy CEO of Epilepsy Action, and also Imogen Courtery, talking about her own personal experience with the condition, talking about a new campaign launches today to encourage us all to understand what to do if someone has a seizure in public.